Hello, FPL managers. Welcome to the FPL Optimized podcast. This is episode number 101. And after last week's special Q&A session, we're now back with a regular episode. And as you can see, Sertalp isn't here today, but we found a great replacement. It's Jonny, and also he's known as the FPL Spaceman.
Hi, Bas. How you doing? Good to be back. Been on a few of these now. So, yes, Sertalp's away, as he always is. Very busy man. But here to fill in. So, very excited.
Yeah, excellent. Yeah, as you said, you've been here before, so I think some people will recognize you. So that's great. But maybe for the people who don't know you yet, can you tell us a little bit about your background and especially related to FPL, of course?
Yeah, so I'm JC, or Jonny, or FPL Spaceman. Can't remember exactly where the moniker came from, but everyone seemed to be picking something. So I've been playing FPL for, I don't know, about a decade or so. But only quite seriously in the last sort of 3 or 4 years. So probably since COVID, I got really into the analytics space and was building my own models and interacting with other people and like Sertalp on his Discord server.
Yeah.
Started playing other fantasy games. So I play like Telegraph, Dream Team, Fan Team, a few others. And I'm also working with Sertalp and Fantasy Football Trout, James and Jorgen on his new project. So that's the new super secret tool that will be out. Yeah, there's still the newsletter. I'll do the plug when he's not here. But
Yeah, you should. And
yes, yeah,
Sertalp talked a little bit about it. He hinted at it, but indeed, yeah, we should definitely keep mentioning it. Yes.
I'll mention it again. But yeah, just fantasy football manager who enjoys chasing expected value and expected ownership risks. I like to play a bit sort of fast and loose with the fantasy stuff, the analytics stuff. But yeah, here to explore, act as the data scientist for this week.
Excellent. Yeah, thanks for covering for Sertalp. And of course, we hope that he's enjoying his time on the beach while we are working hard over here. And probably there will be a few holiday jokes in this episode. We already had two.
For sure.
Anyways, yeah. So today it's me, Bas, as the casual manager, and Jonny, the data scientist. And this is the podcast in which we combine analytics with the good old eye test. Data or grass, or data and grass? That's the question. We're still in the international break, but FPL will be back in the weekend again. So yeah, we can't wait. It's exciting because international football is good. But yeah, I did miss FPL. But yeah, before we look at game week 4, let's do a quick review of game week 3 and maybe also in general, Jonny. Tell us how your season went so far.
Yeah. So in game week 3, I got 85 points, I think, which as we'll get onto is one fewer than Mighty Bass here, top manager. But I made two early transfers that both came off quite well. So I bought in Ryan and Bomo this week for Nkunku, and I also sold Mavididi for Morgan Rogers, which was partly to fund that Bomo move. But also partly because they were both dropping in price, and I guess they've both been dropped. They weren't really playing, so I thought I'll move early, and if it all goes wrong, I've got my wild card. But Mboma paid back handsomely. He got 2 goals, 14 points. So Flecken, Porro, Gabriel, Consa all blanked, but so be it.
Yeah.
And then the midfield, Mboma and Eze both got double-digit returns. Some of my favourite players, those two. Saka got 6, Bruno got 2, Rogers got 2, Haaland captain with his hat trick, his second hat trick, 34, and Isak with 9. So I did bench João Pedro's goal, but he was against Arsenal. I think that was a reasonable thing to do. I don't think there's any of those forwards who I would have not played instead of him. But 85 is okay. So I'm up to 1.4 million, and unfortunately have had to use 2 transfers early on. And I think a lot of people are hoping to roll and save, but if there's value there, then I need to use them. So I think 2 players who weren't playing and dropping in price are people I should probably move on rather than stubbornly holding. But I had some nice options for it. I know other people moved to like Morgan Gibbs White from Nkunku or similar, which I wasn't as keen on. But the fact that I could get to Rodgers and Mbeumo for Southampton, and actually the team's well set because Mbeumo's got Man City and Spurs, but I can bench him for those two because the other front 8 quite good.
Yeah.
But yeah, we're doing okay. It's early days.
Okay.
The rank, who knows what the rank means? Don't know.
Yeah.
But the arrow's green, so we're moving up.
So you're quite happy with your start?
Yeah, happy enough. I think
Yeah.
I did get a little jealous, especially in game week 1 when I saw all the people who'd gone for Salah and how well that team did, and I don't have any
Right.
Liverpool players. And
Yeah.
it just looked like quite a nice sort of balance of the squad, whereas I'd had to make a few sacrifices to get Haaland in, but he scored points too. And I don't think I was really ever considering Haaland and Salah, which is the teams that
No.
have done really well. So it's
Yeah.
more to do with the players around them, and they've done okay. So
Yeah.
we're in a good spot, and
Okay.
yeah, we'll see, but not too bad.
Cool.
How about you, Bas?
Yeah, well, looking at your team, I think actually our teams look quite similar. We also are just 1 point apart, so 86 points for the game week. And yeah, I can't complain too much. I had 3 quite good weeks. My OR is around 200 or 220k. But as you said, I mean, OR doesn't mean too much at this stage. But still, I'm quite happy with the starting position.
It
And
means
I'm
a lot if it's
also
high. I think that's what it means. You should brag about it. If it's not bad, you say it doesn't mean anything. So when with your
yeah.
good overall rank, you should be shouting about it.
Yeah, and I'm
Very
2-0
important.
up in the head-to-head league too with
Well,
Sertalp,
yes.
so that's also good. Yeah, and same to what you said. I'm also quite happy with how my team looks like for the next couple of weeks. I also made 2 transfers last week. Same like you. Nkunku was dropping in price and he wasn't playing much, so I sold him. I got Mitoma, so I hope I didn't follow too much what he is doing in the international break. I suppose he's in Japan, so I hope he'll come back all right. Because Brighton, they have of course 2 good home fixtures coming up. So yeah, the team
Very
is
good.
looking
Yeah.
good. Hopefully, I can save my transfer this week. Yeah, and as you can tell from my team, and actually from the start, I invested quite a lot in my defense with Trent, Gabriel, and Porro, and then also spent quite a lot of money on my attack with Haaland, Isaac, and Havertz. And so far, they have been delivering the points. So yeah, still quite happy. Of course, it means I don't have Salah, which yeah, so far, of course, he's been doing really well, and I'll need to keep an eye on that. But yeah, as we all know, it's quite difficult to fit him in. All right, so yeah, we both have quite a good start. That's good. Now let's start to look forward at game week 4. I think actually quite some people have their wildcard activated during the international break. So now, and I think for them it will be really useful if we look at some of the optimal teams. And as always, I think optimal teams are good to look at for anyone just to consider the names for your transfers. So yeah, Johnny, what could you prepare for today in terms of optimal teams?
Yeah, so we've got a few wild cards. So I've got one up on screen here, which is the it's like just the base wild card. So obviously whenever you're doing an optimal solve, then you are making a few assumptions. So what I have tweaked slightly here is I've made Watkins, and I'm using FPL review data. But Watkins and Palmer have both got a yellow flag for like 75% availability. So I've bumped
Okay.
those up.
Yeah.
Because come deadline we should know, and I'd assume they're
Yeah.
probably okay. So I
Yeah.
put them in because it affects quite a lot. Those players are ones who would come in. So obviously doing the solves now, it's just a caveat, but
Right.
sure people are aware. So
Good point.
this is the first. This is the next 8 game weeks, and then I've summed the remaining game week EV and added that on, and we've allowed transfers, and I've used a free transfer value of 2.1 decaying down to 1.1 for the. So each successive transfer is less valuable. If you have 5, using 1 is less valuable. So that's the base that we've used here. So we've got Henderson and Flecken as sort of a rotating 4.5 pair. I know that if you extend the horizon from some models that go all the way, then actually Verbruggen and Flecken rotate quite well.
Okay.
So Henderson and Flecken might rotate best for the next 7 or 8, but because you're wildcarding for a kind of 20-30 game week actual horizon, you're not using your second wildcard for a while, and people tend not to like to use transfers on goalkeepers. So you might
Yeah.
want to look a little bit further than what the raw EV is showing for these 7 or 8. But Flecken
Okay.
and Henderson, Dunk, and then we've got a Liverpool double up of Alexander-Arnold and Robertson.
Right.
I think Liverpool defence has looked pretty strong, and obviously got a few nice fixtures, and obviously Trent's back in his very nice attacking, crossing, getting the ball in. I'm sure he's going to bang a free kick in soon enough as well, and I'll be ruining that I didn't pick him. But and then we've got Rodgers, Palmer, Eze, Salah, and Bruno Fernandes.
Okay.
So these are all quite popular model
Yeah.
picks. A lot of people who use review will have a lot of these players in, or at least be considering them. But you can tweak it slightly. So that's what the model's suggesting.
Yeah.
And then we do have Watkins in. So assuming he's okay, you can put Watkins in. I guess you could again put your own flavour in. You might want to start with Isak and move to Watkins, or even
Right.
Havertz looked quite good for game week 6, but with the Erdegaard injury, he might be moving further back. And João Pedro as well, who just I think is a bit of a mainstay in most of these teams. He's such good value for 5.5.
Yeah.
And then the
Yeah.
bench is Conser, assuming he's okay as well. A lot of
Yeah.
injury news this week we're waiting for.
Right.
I'm basically waiting for Friday.
Yeah.
And Gabriel, who's on the bench for the first 2 weeks. And then we've got Stewart, who is just not, whoever 4.5 forward
Right.
you want. I
Placeholder.
think he's got a few expected minutes just because Southampton's forwards aren't super good, but you're not
Yeah.
expecting to play them. But there aren't that
No.
many 4.5 forwards. So
No.
Stewart is the one that the model has picked.
Okay.
So we can see it is a Salah, no Haaland team
Yeah.
as the base optimal, which I think makes sense because obviously Haaland is super expensive and he does have Arsenal in game week 5. So you're probably not going to be captaining him for the next couple of weeks. I think he's only really the standout captain in game week 9 against Southampton.
Okay.
So if I was wildcarding now, actually you can spread the funds and
Yeah.
get some quite good things for that.
Yeah.
But I would also caveat this is my team value, so it's going to change very slightly for your own team. And also because
Right.
I've used 2 transfers, I've only got 1 free transfer. Whereas a lot of the people who have played with the intention of wildcard 4 have set up specifically rolled in game week 2 and 3. So they're going to wildcard and then have 3 free transfers in game week
Right.
5, whereas I would only have 1. So
Yeah.
I've done a wildcard as well where you start with 3 free transfers
Okay.
just to sort of see what's changed. And not too much. I think we do we bring in Minter instead of
Maintain.
Rodgers
Yeah.
for their really nice 2 fixtures. So we treble up on Brighton. And what else has changed? Henderson, Flecken. That's it
I
mostly.
think on the bench we see Harwood
Oh,
Ballast
we
now.
swapped to Harwood Bellis from Concert.
Yeah.
Yeah, so that's where the 0.5 comes from.
Right.
So if you want to be a little bit more attacking, I think doubling up on the Brighton attack is quite a nice way to, because you can afford to bank those transfers in game week 6 a little bit more to get to Mbomo or
Right.
something like that.
Yeah.
Because you have 3, whereas I would only have 1. So I think that's something that when we're looking at other people's teams, we need to be aware of that actually that's much more of a thing this year, especially with the wild cards. Because before you wild card and everyone has 1 the next
Start
week.
over.
Whereas
Yeah.
actually, even if we wild card with the same team value, if you've got 3 and I've got 1,
Yeah.
we're in a different position.
Yeah. Good point.
But that's the structure it quite likes. But there are a lot of close ones. So what do
Yeah.
you make? What do you make of these teams? This sort of setup
Oh
with
no, I mean it
Salah
looks
and
good.
no
I think
Haaland.
yeah, I mean that's clear, right? I think what we're seeing in the solver is indeed maybe saving money up front. As you said, Joe Pedro is a very attractive option for his price, and also with the fixtures coming up for Brighton. And then yeah, Watkins of course a bit more expensive, but then Stewart on the bench. So yeah, quite let's say cheap in the attack, and a very strong midfield, and also a very strong defense with both Trent and Robertson. So yeah, that's of course a little bit the weakness in my team where I invested a lot of money, and probably more people did it with Haaland, Isaac, and then a third attacker. Then for those teams, the midfield looks less strong, and where we see now in the solver, it really focuses on the midfield. Yeah, And I guess it's so far a little bit the story of the season, right? Like, which strategy do you go for? Do you bet on one horse, let's say, like Haaland? So far, it has paid off, I would say, with his double hat tricks. But as soon as he blanks, then of course it's much better to spread the funds, because yeah, it's more likely that another player will get some points. So yeah, I think we will probably keep talking about this for the next few weeks, because it also, with of course how the pricing was set up this season, I think this probably will be a debate. And of course, as you said, the fixtures maybe turn a little bit tougher for City, but as I said last time, personally, I don't mind it too much, because I think Haaland can score in any game. But again, it does sound quite smart to just spread the risk a bit.
I think it's actually been really good pricing, and that's partly why we're having
Yeah,
these discussions. And there are several
yeah,
different structures which do quite well. So
yeah,
obviously playing the wild card now is like, what's the best structure if you were starting now? But
right,
actually, the structure that if you're on a different structure, then actually it can compete quite well for the next few weeks. And for
yeah,
those of people who've looked at wildcard 6 or solving wildcard 6, actually the structure might look a bit different again.
right,
And then
right,
wildcard 8, the structure's a bit different again, and wildcard
sure,
10. So actually the best structure for any given short period of time to start with, it changes quite a lot, which is what we're trying to manage with these fixture flows from. So I think if you wildcarded in 4 or 6 or 8 or 10, they'd all have a different
yeah,
team structure, premium structure.
yeah,
So actually, it's which one can you use to either better navigate through those with your transfers, or run it close. So I think actually those who started with Salah only at the start of the season, um, basically, because we see now that actually probably the best structure if you wildcarded now is to have, well, you should have Salah in. It's whether you want Haaland as well,
yeah,
um, or probably. But the bet there was that they could run a Haaland team close for the first few, and then have Salah in and not need to make the transfers. Whereas for those of us who started with a Haaland team, we're now in the spot where we're trying to run Salah teams close without using our transfers, or
mm,
getting set for game week 6. So actually getting ready for your Arsenal players and your Brentford players, and
yeah,
actually losing a little bit now, but being well set. Whereas I think
right,
what people might fall into the trap of doing is trying to chase that structure every time and be having to be on the best
right,
structure in 4, 6, 8, and 10.
yeah.
And actually,
That's impossible, of
unless you
course.
have 4
Yeah.
wild cards, you probably can't do that. So it's
That could be the mystery chip
which we
for
don't. Well,
wildcard.
maybe, but I can't use it till January, sadly. But
No, that's true.
yeah. So I think also to add, like, starting with Stuart, it does try to move the funds around a bit later on. So I think he moved to Solanke later.
Oh, yeah.
So I think it's Palmer who makes way in about 9 or 10 in this plan.
Okay.
Um, but if we get positive news on Solanke, then he could be one to start with as
But
well. I
yeah,
think he's really
indeed.
strong. So there's still things to play around
Yeah,
with.
I mean,
But
you made a good point, right? We see that every international break, there's not so much news coming from the teams,
mhm,
so we probably have to wait until Friday. And again, for anyone who still didn't make transfers, it's probably quite smart to wait until Friday, because yeah, that's when we probably hear more, especially like Palmer. I think we saw some pictures already of him in training, so I think Palmer's looking quite good. But yeah, there could be
he's
other
also
reasons.
he's not in their Conference League squad.
Right, which
So
is also interesting.
it's
Yeah,
probably it is interesting, but also, like, it's probably better for his Premier League minutes. But then the
yes,
fact that he's not been included is that a red flag? And I don't think we're going to get much out of
no,
Maresca telling us what he's doing.
yeah, no.
Whereas I
He's
think
got
if
enough players to choose from.
yeah, that's one of the upsides I think of Solanke, that obviously you say the
Yeah,
model doesn't capture, but Ange is
yeah,
just honest. He just tells you. So if he
right,
says, "Yeah, Solanke's ready," then I think I'd
yeah.
believe it, and then I'll bring him in maybe.
That's a good point.
Um, but we did also do a team where Haaland is locked
Right.
in.
Yes.
So this is the slightly different structure. So this actually isn't that doesn't score that much lower than the
Okay.
no Haaland team. So it has Salah as well, but it goes for Martinez and Flecken. It must just have a spare 0.5 from elsewhere, and Villa's fixtures are good. Dunk, Trent, Robertson again.
Yeah.
Rogers, Minter, Eze, Salah, and Fernandez. So it goes for Rogers and Minter, and
Right.
drops Palmer.
Palmer.
So if we have poor news on Palmer coming up, maybe he is actually injured, then suddenly you've got Haaland back in your team.
Right.
Whereas actually like this scores well enough anyway. So if you want to go against Palmer, or you're scared of, well, I say scared of Haaland's ownership, that's a valid thing to be scared of. He's a very good player and he's very well owned. So I don't mean that in a derogatory sense, but
Hmm.
this is a way you could go. So you get a couple of cheaper mids and dodge Palmer,
Yeah.
and you drop Watkins out as well. So this is probably what would come out top if I'd left the injury flags on Palmer and Watkins.
Yeah.
So then João Pedro and Haaland again, and then Konsa, Mosquera, and Stewart, everyone's favourite.
Yeah.
So that's the Haaland structure. So
Yeah,
is
I'm
this?
actually quite surprised because you don't need to
Yeah,
sacrifice too much, right? It's as to your point. It's basically
yeah.
Palmer to Minte. Um,
Well,
and yeah, yeah, you yeah.
Watkins. Watkins
Watkins
goes
and
up to
Haaland.
Haaland, the Palmer goes down
Right.
to Minter, and
Yeah.
that might actually be it. There's a few different changes.
Yeah.
So it's pretty
Okay.
similar actually. You kind of see like
Yeah.
actually the players around it quite similar. I think
Yeah.
that's partly once we get a few weeks in, a lot of the players are a bit more established. So Eze is a really strong player. I think he just sticks out at his price. But
Yeah.
at the start of the season, I can totally see why you wouldn't go for him, because he had the transfer speculation. Is he going
Right.
to join Man City, where he becomes a dead asset? Is he going to join Spurs, where he's not as strong and he's still good? So that's the risk you take. Whereas now, I think
Right.
anyone who didn't have Eze, certainly those using analytics and models, will be figuring out a way to get to him.
Yeah.
Um, so I think,
Yeah, and that's I
yeah.
think the other nice thing this season is that we also have some cheap midfielders who are doing quite well so far, right? We have in this team we got Rogers and Minte. I think Rogers has been really impressive. Maybe not yet with the points that he scored, but just by the way he's quite dominating some of the games. And dominating meaning a lot of possession, very active on the pitch, playing 90 minutes. So that's great. Minte as well. And then there are a few others like last week we talked about Semenyo from Bournemouth. I have Smith Rowe in my team from Fulham. So that's also of course quite nice that you have those, let's say, enablers
Hmm.
to then go for some of the bigger names in the rest of your team.
Yeah, and I think actually like a lot of more of those have stood the test of time than I thought might do
Yeah,
from the start of the
so far.
season, because there was
Yeah,
kind of a question mark on almost all of them,
yeah,
even if it was only a small one. Whereas actually the slightly higher price was, so Nkunku has not stood the test of time, and
right.
I did
Yeah,
end up picking Mavadidi, who didn't
ah,
stack up, but Smith
yeah,
Rowe still playing well. Rogers
yeah,
had, I wasn't super sure on his minutes, but looks pretty nailed, and obviously
yeah,
Champions League comes in, so who
yeah,
knows? But he's looking really good, and
yeah,
Emery's been raving about him. And yeah, Minter as well. We weren't sure how Brighton were going to set up, and
right.
actually he looks like he's got a good share of the minutes. So
Yeah,
there are more of them that have stuck around than I think we potentially initially thought. So when you were setting your team up in game week one, having to rely on one of those players and potentially not having so many off ramps, I guess, if you're stuck, um, was possibly not something we wanted to do. So you didn't really want to pick three of them or two of them,
yeah,
because then you go, okay, well, where do I go if this one
right,
gets injured? Whereas actually,
right.
because some of them are sticking out a bit better or have made it through the transfer window, and Sterling went to Arsenal and not Villa, that was one of the things that might have harmed Rodgers. Um,
Ah,
Actually,
yeah,
yeah, there's quite a few of them around, and even Semenyo, as you say, has been getting
yeah,
good minutes. So
yeah,
I think that does allow you to get Salah
yeah.
and Haaland, possibly more
Okay.
so than we might have thought at the start of the season.
Yeah, true.
Um, so it's interesting.
Okay.
Yeah.
Now let's imagine that there are some people who don't want Salah in their teams. That's
Yes.
maybe a last
This
wild
is this
card
is
to
the
look
last
at.
the last one.
Yeah,
Yeah. So this is if you, well, I guess we were looking at different structures, and at the start of the season, yeah, Haaland or Salah or neither or both all
right.
looked quite good. Um, Whereas this is the structure that a lot of us are on who started with Haaland, and I think if you're wild carding, it's not the one to wild card into. It's probably the one to wild card out of. So actually, Haaland
Mm,
with no Salah does score a reasonable chunk worse. on the evaluations.
Okay.
Well, I think Salah's just top captaincy in game week 5, so not having him for
Right.
that is a bit of a, well, I'm not sure why you wouldn't if you had the choice with unlimited transfers. But we've got
Yeah.
Ramsdale and Flecken. I'm not sure why it's picked that or if it's short of money, but because he's 4.4. Konsa, Dunk, Trent, Robertson, so they're all starting same as before. Rogers, Palmer, Eze, Bruno, João Pedro, and Haaland, and then it picks Mbomo, just ready for game week 6, I guess.
Yeah.
Gabriel and Stewart again,
Right.
who's been in all of them, whichever your
Yes.
4.5 preference is. But
Yeah.
yeah, so it allows you to upgrade back up to Mbomo. It allows you to keep Palmer basically as well. But there's no Watkins. So this is what Haaland with
Yeah.
no Salah is.
Plus it has
So
Gabriel, which I think we didn't have in
it
the other
does,
teams.
yeah. So Salah drops to Palmer,
Yeah.
and Mbomo comes in for Minter, and you can upgrade Mosquera, I think it was from last one, to
Yeah.
Gabriel.
Right.
So it's still a strong team, and I think it
Yeah.
actually looks quite similar to a lot of teams that people already have. But so I guess it shows that if you're not wildcarding, your team is still not that far away from the teams that are wildcarding in the
Right.
evaluation scores,
Yeah.
because this team scores worse than the other wildcards. But if your team already looks like this, you can have it without a wildcard.
Yeah.
So this is what makes me think that actually my team's in a spot where I don't need to wildcard
Right.
this week, failing a few injuries or maybe some positive
Right.
news on Solanke or something like that.
Yeah.
So once Konsa went off hobbling, I thought, oh, okay, actually, if there's like one more, then I might be in wildcard territory. But looks
Yeah.
like he's okay, and
Okay.
unless there's a shock on Friday, who knows?
Yeah.
So
I'll need to watch that as well because I also
yeah,
have.
but I think for me it's just wait till Friday. But I
Yeah.
know that so just for prefacing, we're recording this on Wednesday evening.
Right. Yeah. Good
So
point.
England played last night, and Konsa had a bit of a knock and played on for a bit and then came off. And it sounds
Okay.
like he's okay, but
Yeah.
Erdegaard came off as well. Ake came
Right.
off. There's actually
Yeah.
quite a few that we're waiting on news from.
Yeah. I saw
Um,
the Netherlands and
yeah,
Ake looked like quite a bad injury. Uh, it was quite strange because he was kind of doing a sprint towards the goal and then he stopped. So I would say typical kind of hamstring
not great.
injury. But I mean, he just stood still on the pitch and then he started to sit down and it looked like he was in a lot of pain. And that was a bit strange because normally with a hamstring injury, you feel it. But the way he acted, like it was more like, yeah, it was looked quite serious. But I didn't see more updates about it. But that will be one to watch.
Yeah, we'll
Yeah,
have to wait and see. But it might
yeah,
affect someone like, I think
yeah,
Gvardiol is someone who people are looking at, and actually maybe he is a bit more secure than we first thought. But if Ake is
yeah,
not there, then he's not marauding down the left wing like he was last season. But he's nailed for minutes, and City's defense is pretty good. So I
yeah,
think he'd be someone who actually would start to feature if we bumped his expected minutes up a little bit. So that's the
yeah.
kind of thing that might make him a bit stronger.
Or Rico Lewis, right?
Indeed, yeah, yeah. So
Just looking at it now, he's only 4.7. So I think he went already up twice in price, but still really cheap if he if he keeps getting minutes in the City defense.
yeah, so I think this is one where obviously you should bring your own expectations on the playing time, but the models often err on slightly on the side of caution, I think. So
Yeah,
actually, if you have slightly lower expected minutes expectations, then it's factoring in the fact that they might not play. But in the instance where they do play all the games, which is entirely plausible, then I think they're really strong and they would start to show up a bit more.
yeah,
So that's the kind of thing where you can do a bit more some of this like sensitivity analysis stuff that we talk
right.
about. But this top line
Okay.
doesn't have them in. But
Yeah,
they are strong options and could become stronger. I think it's hard to get a read on Lewis. I feel like he's plays until he has a bad one almost. Whereas Vardiol, yeah, Ake
yeah,
injury would bump him up. But
true.
yeah,
Could be.
I think these structures all do quite well. So
Yeah,
and you can see the common players. These are obviously the model favorites. So Eze,
yeah.
Rogers,
And I think you
Contra
have a
Dunk,
summary chart as
Gabriel.
well, right?
I do. Yes. Let me just bring that up. So this
Me-
is just a summary of those 4 teams, just so you can compare them across. So we see that
Yeah,
generally it's going 4.5 rotating goalkeepers.
Right.
But if you found an extra 0.5 million, I think Raya and a 4.0 or Edison and a 4.0 are pretty viable. But or certainly they're strong goalkeeper pairings, but
Yeah.
maybe not one you'd wildcard with because they play each other in game week 5. So they might
Yeah.
be a bit more popular on a wildcard 6, perhaps, or people who've
Right.
started with them. But then we see, well, I think Dunks in all of them, Conses in all of them, Trent and Robertson. So that Liverpool double up
John
is
and
what it really
Robertson.
likes to do. But
Right.
you might want a Liverpool forward if you wanted to attack. So you might still want Jota. Or I know Szoboszlai is only 6.5 as well, and I think there was just rumor about an Elliott injury, so he might be a little more assured for minutes. But maybe I don't know if you want to add that
Yeah.
in. But it's that premium structure. I think actually a lot of the players that are on the side you can see from this. So yeah,
Yeah.
Stuart and João Pedro are the ones to lock in.
Oh, Pedro, indeed, all the teams. I think also Eza and all the teams. So there are a few players who look, yeah, quite, let's say, essential. I think we don't like to use that word, but if we look at these simulations, the players that come back in all the different options. Yeah.
Yeah, and again, you can see the objective scores on here. So
Yeah.
that's basically with a 0.85 decay rate, which is what we use in the solver
Okay.
a lot of the time. So each successive week is valued 85% as much.
All right.
So that will sum across the 8 game weeks. And the lineup EV is just that's like the raw all the way through, but it doesn't account for bench auto subs. But you can see
Yeah.
here that the Haaland with no Salah team scores a bit worse.
Yeah.
But it's not a huge amount. So I wouldn't
It's not
wildcard
huge.
into it. But
No.
again, you go, okay, if I'm on this team, I'm losing like 4 eval score, which is probably
Yeah.
not enough to go, I should wildcard. So it's probably
No.
if you've got other issues with the team. But
Yeah.
yeah, they all look quite good. I think there's a few different ways you can go with it, basically.
Yeah.
But yeah, Salah, Trent, Robbo, and
Great.
all the favourites.
Yeah.
Seems to be a good way to go. But
Yeah, but thanks a lot for preparing this. So I think again for anyone on wildcard, I think we gave you 4 good options to look at, and also again for anyone not on wildcard but still considering to make a transfer, these are the players you should be looking at, I would say.
yes,
All right, I think the next thing we always look at in preparation for the next game week is the best captain options. So I think you also have a chart for that one, right?
I do. Yes, so I've got
Yeah.
everyone's favourite Rob T FPL on
Rob
Twitter.
T.
Friend of the
Shout
pod,
out.
you might say.
Yes.
Yeah, so he gathers all the spread markets data for team
Yes.
projections.
Yeah.
So I know that Sertalp often looks at across the various models and sees which ones are popping up, but I don't have access to all of them. So
Yeah.
I think it's a fairly clear Salah or Haaland. And I think
Right.
there's not many people without either.
Right.
So if you don't have either of them, then I think maybe an Eze or a Bruno Fernandes or even a João Pedro. I feel like you could just pick one, but there's a fair gap in most of the models and the odds to
Yeah.
Liverpool and City, which you can see like their team projections are the highest two here.
Yeah.
So we've got Liverpool projecting 2.8 goals and Man City projecting 2.95 goals.
Right.
So the fact that obviously Salah and Haaland get the lion's share of their team's goals, those are the two really to be looking at. So I think Haaland is probably slightly edging it in the markets and the models at the moment,
Yeah. Yeah.
but not so much that you should be worried if you're capturing Salah. So
No.
I think it's a relatively straightforward one this week. It's more to do with thinking about how do you get to Salah for 5 or
Right.
Son maybe in 5 or actually what you're going to do there. So there's
Yeah.
future weeks where it's more how do I get the right captain? But because
Yeah.
so many of us have Haaland or Salah or both,
Right.
then it's not a. But I
Yeah.
think most people have one and not the other. In which
Right.
case, I'm not going to
Oh,
make the
that's true.
decision for you, but it's a fairly clear choice, certainly on the
Yeah.
model perspective. So I'm sure their expected ownership will be pretty high.
Yeah.
So probably not the week to go against it if you're trying to chase something, especially in game week 4. Like we're
Yeah.
a long way from the end. You don't have to do anything crazy just yet. But
Yeah.
are you considering anyone else, or is it quite
No,
firmly
no.
on Haaland?
I got Haaland, and after
Yeah,
2 hat-tricks, I think, yeah, who knows? Maybe this can be a third
brave man to go
consecutive
against
one,
that. Yeah,
which would be a record, uh, I suppose. Must be. But yeah, even then, right? We saw it last week or 2 weeks ago. Like Haaland had this hat trick on Saturday, and then everybody was, of course, very happy, and the people without Haaland were a bit upset. But then the next day, Liverpool played, and Salah had the same score in the end. So yeah, to your point, I think the two of them are really quite close to each other. They both now have a good home game. Liverpool at home against Forest, City at home against Brentford. So yeah, you can take either one. The
they
other games I
they
do like.
both play at 3 o'clock as well this week
Okay,
on the
yeah,
Saturday. So there's no going to be
they play
hindsight.
at the
Well,
same time.
maybe Haaland scores a hat trick in the first half and Salah scores it in the second half, and half time
That
everyone's doing
could
the
happen.
gloating. But
Yeah,
yeah, they're at the same time, so you don't need to hide behind your sofa in the same way
no,
that
no,
well
that's
Haaland
true.
Nunes did. Um, the other
No, the
game
other
you were
thing,
liking was Brighton.
yeah, the other thing I just
Yeah,
wanted to say, indeed, Brighton, a really good home game against Ipswich, and we got different players there who we can choose from. I think we see Joe Pedro on the picture. There is Welbeck, who has done really well so far, and of course also the midfielders. So yeah, I'm quite excited to see how that game will turn out. And personally, as an Isaac owner, I didn't sell him. I hope that he will do well, because actually I think he's the most sold player this week. And
yeah, I think
Newcastle
he
go
is.
to Wolves. So yeah,
Yeah,
uh,
it's not a super easy game, but Wolves aren't the strongest team, and
no,
I think Newcastle just haven't really been firing on all cylinders
no,
yet.
that's
And
true.
but he scored last week, and that's not something we
Yeah,
should.
and I think he
He
also
can
scored two
score.
in the
Maybe we're
in the
not super
international
excited.
break.
Yeah. Yes, he
Um,
did. Yeah, paired with.
and Chelsea scored 6 goals at Molineux.
They
So
did. Yeah.
yeah, no guarantee that that will happen every time. But
Yeah.
yeah,
Well,
I
maybe
think,
maybe Wolves have shored up. They've been embarrassed, and they've decided to be more
yeah,
defensive. And
that's true. There's
yeah,
always two ways to look at it.
who
But
knows?
personally, I'm quite happy to keep Isaac.
Hmm.
Let's see what he will do.
Yeah, I don't think he's a problem player. I don't think he's one
No,
that, unless you're really trying to hop on someone else. So maybe you don't have João Pedro, or it frees up the funds. Then yeah, he's still a
right.
good player, but probably not one
No,
to
you're
keep
right.
on
I
for
mean,
the
actually, I
season.
would like to have João Pedro, but I wouldn't know who to sell because I got Isaac and Havertz, and
Yeah,
I'm quite happy to keep them. Um, but yeah,
yes,
those are the dilemmas we face every week.
that's the game.
All right. Well, I think we covered actually quite a lot. And probably that's it for today on this, unless you had something else to add, Johnny?
No, I think we can just wrap up the mini league leaders.
Yeah, the mini league.
Um,
Yeah, let's take
awesome.
a quick look. And also, I checked that we have 392 teams in it, so that's really nice. Thanks for joining it. I saw that there's also 6 on the waiting list. They will be added in the weekend. So yeah, we're close to breaking the 400 mark, and you can still join. The code is 9GXNDK. I'll just repeat that. It's 9GXNDK. And the top 3 currently, we got the number 1 team is Snoopy Udogi Dog by the manager LJ Fraser. And LJ Fraser left a comment also on YouTube. So we know he's regularly listening to us. So well done. He said that he started the season sorry for that, a bit more aggressively than usual. And so far it paid off. So yeah, keep it up, Mr. Fraser.
He's inside
And
the top 200. I've just checked.
oh,
199th.
that's nice.
What a
That's
start!
nice.
Wow.
Wow, still a long time to go, but it's always good to have a good start. Number 2 is Clement Ubajaka, who had a great week with 106 points. So this gave him now the number 2 spot in the mini league. And then number 3 is Carl Prendergast, who was number 2 last time, but he dropped a place. So yeah, as I said, the season is quite long still, but yeah, it doesn't harm to have a good start, and good luck to everyone in the mini league.
Where are you ranked in the mini league bus?
I just wanted to ask you the same thing.
Okay,
I'm
I beat you to
actually
it.
39th, so I'm quite happy with
I
that.
think I'm 175th or something. So
Oh,
we're
okay.
midway through.
Yeah,
It's a strong league,
it is a strong league.
but
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
yeah,
And
I'm
last
sure
year I
I'll
was
sure we'll be climbing.
last season I was close to the bottom most of the time, so I'm really happy to be 39 now.
Very nice.
Let's see if I can keep it up.
I've forgotten where I finished last year. I think I spent a long while sort of hovering in actually like 11th to 15th and was really
Okay.
trying to like get into the top 10 to get on the
Yeah.
podcast, but never quite managed it and then fell off right at the end. But it's, yes, very
Yeah.
well done to these
Well,
10.
we'll keep an eye on you, and we'll make sure that you'll
Long
be
way to
mentioned
go.
in the podcast. All right. Well, that's it for today. Thanks everyone for listening, and thanks Johnny for taking Sertalp's role. Everyone can, if you're listening, you can of course subscribe to our podcast, so you'll get notified when the next episode is out, and you can also follow us on X. For Johnny, it's at FPL Spaceman, and there's an underscore, FPL_Spaceman. For Sertalp, it's at Sertalp Bilal. For me, it's at Belfi BB. And we also have the separate account for the podcast, which is at FPL Optimized. And for the people who are listening to the podcast, you can also see FPL Optimized on YouTube. And that's it for today.
I get to do the very famous sign off line. Very excited. Until next time, stay curious and stay analytical. Goodbye.
Goodbye.